Hello, good morning, everyone. Let's wait for a minute so that others can also join. Also, before we start, you would have received a feedback form for the previous month. So please give your feedback, fill the form, and send it across. So yesterday we had started with an introduction to social issues and justice, wherein we saw how the syllabus is and what manner we are going to proceed. Post that we started with salient features of Indian society, under which we have already discussed the caste system. Now the next social institution, and rather a salient feature of Indian society, is family and marriage. And we had yesterday started with family, with this definition that what does a family mean? So a family is a defined set of relationships between at least two persons who are related by birth, marriage, or adoption. So take example of a family, a husband and a wife who are related by marriage. Then they procreate and give birth to a child which is related by who's related by birth, and also they can adopt a children. They will also be considered a part of the family. Now, one thing that the definition that we have given keeps evolving because previously family was understood primarily because of its function of procreation, and now the definition is changing. It is evolving. Then we started discussing what are the functions of family. So as I have already suggested that every social institution has a function. So starting with biological function, the first function is just think about a husband and a wife. There has to be sexual gratification because a biological urge of sex, it has to be fulfilled through marriage. And I have already explained that any relationship for that matter has to be legitimized by society. So family is a method wherein the sexual urge can be fulfilled through marriage. Then another function of family is giving birth to a child. That is procreation. That through family, through marriage, the birth of the child happens, and also it is legitimized by society. And you would have seen that if a child is born without a marriage, they are considered illegitimate. Why? Because the society has not legitimized that relationship. Then if we take up the economic function, think of a family which stays together. Their economic needs, their economic security, their other aspects of social security like healthcare, education are taken care of by the family. Take your example. That a few of you might be studying in the college. So your educational needs, your health needs are taken care of by your parents. So family is one unit wherein which takes care of the economic security and the social security of the family. Now, if we understand production and consumption, you see that in an agrarian society, family was the unit of production. How? That the family used to produce together, which was primarily taken up for consumption. As we understand, subsistence farming. So a family grows enough to take care of the consumption of the family. But with modern times, you see that we are moving from an agrarian to industrial and ultimately to a service sector based society. And here we see that family is no more a unit of production because we go take up jobs, earn income, and basis that we consume, and not just the individual who's earning, the entire family consumes. And also you have to understand that now we see that the institution of family is becoming egalitarian. Women are also going out to work, but previously in traditional Indian society, women were limited to household work, and it was the male members of the society or the family who will go out and work, earn income, or get involved in agriculture. But still, the entire family will be economically secure. So I hope you understand the economic function. Then another aspect is socialization of children. As we have already understood, socialization as a relationship between individual and the society. And once a child is born, the primary source of socialization is family. It is your family who teaches what language to speak, how to behave, what are various values of this family, what are various other aspects of society. Then they teach you about the religion, the cultural practices, which is basically primary socialization. So another function is primary socialization or socialization of children. Then we can think of the psychological function. Psychological function in the sense that family is the one who will give you affection, who will give you love. Family will take care of your emotional needs because if you feel down, if you feel sad, we automatically end up calling our family. We talk to our parents, we talk to our siblings, and that's how psychological function is taken care of. Now you see the psychological function is a new dimension because traditionally family was primarily understood as a unit of consumption, a unit of production and consumption to legitimize children and to socialize children. Now this psychological function or the psychological dimension of family is a new thing. Now with these functions, you can understand that what is the role of family, why family is important. But it is not without its flaws. If you see that family, these functions of family also have some criticisms. Just think about a child who is born and brought up in family. They have to adhere to the norms of the family. They have to understand that they cannot go beyond their family values. For example, the institution of caste, understand that. The institution of caste says that you are not supposed to marry outside the caste, wherein the practice of endogamy is prevalent. Now, primarily, it is the family which will enforce that idea, which will enforce those values. So somewhere, the free development of personality, the idea of freedom, the idea of choice of various family members gets restricted. Also, you can think about this in terms of traditionally when women were not supposed to work, women were not allowed to work. So there as well, you can see that they cannot develop their personality freely. Also, with the institution of patriarchy, and as we see that most of the societies across the globe were patriarchal, which is slowly breaking down this patriarchal system, which says that the male members have more authority compared to the female members of the family. So it is the male members who will be the part of decision making. It is the male members who will tell what has to be done, what are the family values, what has to be the say primary economic activity, etc. So this is another criticism wherein you see that the women are subdued compared to men. Also, women were primarily involved in unpaid labor because this idea of remunerative employment, wherein women go out and work in industries, they work in the service sector. This is a new concept. This is a new idea. This is the changing realm of family. Also, if we see that the movable and immovable properties of the family are transferred from one generation to another. So another criticism is that because of this institution of family, this property stays in the family. And think of it as a criticism which comes from Marxist ideas, wherein they say that the material wealth, because you have rich families, they'll go on transferring that property, they will go on transferring that wealth down the line in their family itself. It remains in the same family. And this transfer of wealth, this transfer of property is something which is also a part of decision making when it comes to choosing the partner. And that will come to in the next part of this lecture. Then this obedience to value, this obedience to authority impacts creativity. Think of a situation where you actually want to become a civil servant and your parents say no. Your say father, who generally who have the more authority, they say no, you have to become a doctor, or you have to become an engineer, or you have to become a part of the family business. So there you see that it impacts the freedom of choice of an individual. Also, because of these aspects, you can see it breeds trauma. Take example of LGBTQ community, wherein say they want to go for same-sex marriage, and you see that how staunch an opposition we get from this institution of family whenever there is a change. So in sociology, we understand it as whenever there is a change, there has to be a backlash against it. That we'll also see in terms of globalization when we discuss globalization and urbanization. So which ultimately breeds trauma. Now these functions are also, you have to understand, these functions are also changing. These functions are also going under change. Also, when we talk about the types of family, it is not limited to this. This is the basic categorization of family, and you have other types as well. So let's take up one by one. Also, if you talk about residence, the first thing you have to understand is family is also understood as people who live under the same roof, people who share the kitchen, people who become or who behave as a single economic unit. Another function of family that you can understand is, which is a social function, that the status of individuals is directly dependent on family. So you pass on your family name from one generation to another. So you get your, because your basic form of identity in the families, in the society is that this is the family you come from, this is the family you belong to. So which also forms a part of social identity. Now, if we talk about residence, so family is a unit which stays together under one roof. They share one kitchen. They share the economic resources. They socialize their children. They take care of the social security needs of the family members. And also, you see in future that this institution of family, which is changing, which is evolving from joint, we're moving towards nuclear. This is a dent on the aspect of social security provided by the family, and wherein your state has to step in. That we'll discuss. Now, on basis of residence, a family can be either patrilocal or matrilocal. And also, there is a new concept of neolocal coming in. Now, when I say patrilocal, if you see generally in India, what happens is if two people get married, one boy and a girl, generally the girl goes to stay at the boy's house, boy's parents' house. Because after the wedding, generally it is the girl who moves to the boy's parents' house. And that idea of girl living with boy's parents' family is called patrilocal family. So on the basis of residence, you find that we have patrilocal and then we have matrilocal families, wherein the boy goes to live at the girl's house or live at the girl's parents' house. And this is something which is an exception which you find in a few societies or in a few groups. So for instance, you have Garos and Khasis. So in Garos and Khasis, when a boy and a girl get married, the boys goes to stay at girl's parents' house. And also there is this concept of neolocal. And I hope you are able to understand. So when you say patri, it is related to the patrilineal aspect. And then matri, you can relate it with mother, that is the female side. Now when we say neolocal is an arrangement where you see that a boy and a girl, once they get married, rather than going to the boy's parents' house to live, or rather than going to the girl's parents' house to live, they go and start their new home. They go and start their new household and family in the form of nuclear families. So this is something where a boy and a girl, or the bride and the groom, they start a new family. And this is something that we see in this modern industrialized world, because a few of you might be married. And rather than staying at your rural house home with your parents, you come to the city and live together, away from the family of both. So this is on the basis of residence. Now, if we talk about the basis of authority, authority means that who exercises more control in the family, who is the one who will be who will take the decisions, be it economic, be it otherwise. So on basis of authority, you find that either it is the male members of the society or male members of the family who do all the decision making. That is generally we find in Indian society and across the globe. So patriarchal is where male members of the family exercise authority. And similarly, matriarchal families are the ones where it is the female members who exercise authority in the family. They are the ones who take all the decisions. So for so patriarchal is something that is generally prevalent. And for matriarchal, you have examples of, again, Nayars from Kerala, and then Garos and Khasis. If we talk about lineage, you can understand it as passing of family name. Now again, in India, we generally see that you get the name of your father. The lineage that is traced is generally from the father's side, that they belong to this family. He's your father, and then your grandfather, so on and so forth. But also, there are matrilineal families as well, wherein the lineage is traced from the mother's side. So mother, her mother, so on and so forth. Then if we talk about the size of families, you primarily find nuclear and joint families. Now when we talk about nuclear family, it is generally not more than 2 generations. It is not more than 2 generations living together. Take example, a husband and a wife, they get married, they give birth to their children. This is what an idea of nuclear family. But if these generations are more than 2, it is considered as joint family. So for instance, you living with your parents and your grandparents. Now this is one idea. Another thing is, when we talk about not more than 2 generations in a nuclear family, it is also assumed that the children are not married. So you can understand, either there have to be 2 generations, or say one, it can be 1 generation as well, wherein there is no children in the family. It is only the husband and the wife. And also, there are not more than 2 bonds of marriage in a family. So when we understood family as an institution, we said that it is on the basis of birth, adoption, or marriage, or the bond of marriage. So also, there are not more than 2 generations plus not more than 2 bonds of marriage. And your joint family or extended family, because joint family is a word that we use here in India, but extended family can also be called extended family, is the one where you have more than 2 bonds of marriage, or either you have more than 2 generations living together. So I hope this is understood. Now, if you see that even on the basis of types of family, one thing that we understand is that generally India has a patrilineal, patrilocal, and patriarchal setup. And traditionally, we find joint families in India. And not just traditionally, we see that generally the idea of joint family is related to agriculture, because in agriculture it is assumed that the more the number of people are engaged, the more the production can happen. And also living as one unit, because there you can take care of all the other aspects of life. Now, one thing before starting with the other aspects that we can discuss is, look at your nuclear families and your joint families in the light of their functions. Now, if we talk about the biological function, they both have same function, be it a joint family, be it a nuclear family. So the biological functions of giving birth to children and sexual gratification remain the same. But when it comes to your social functions, things change here. How? In a joint family, you see that family is considered one unit. All the members of the family share one kitchen. All the members of family take care of each other. But when it comes to nuclear families, you see that it is just the immediate family, just those 3 members who are being taken care of. Because in joint family, just think about the positives of it. If you think in terms of positives, you see that if someone gets divorced in a family, if someone passes away in the family, think about the elderly in a joint family. Now, all their needs are being taken care of by the joint family. But what happens to the elderly when it becomes a nuclear family? Because the elderly are left in a separate home, and the young generations go on moving to, say, newer places. It can be either rural or it can be urban, but generally you find that they tend to move towards urban areas. And also this change, one of the factors of change that we are going to discuss is going to be urbanization and industrialization. That will discuss how do they impact family. So if you look at the positives of joint family, you see that they take care of the economic security of the ones who are unfortunately, who they lack some ideas. So for instance, there is someone in the family who is disabled. So their social and economic needs will be taken care of by the family. Then also you can think about elderly. But on the negative side, you see, when it is a joint family, it is mostly women who have a lower status as compared to a nuclear family. Because women, as a part of the family, are not supposed to go outside and work. They're not supposed to get better economic opportunities, so which directly impacts their status. Whereas in nuclear families, we see that nuclear families are more or less egalitarian. Egalitarian in the sense that both female and male members of the family have they exercise pretty much similar authority. They have equal say in matters of the family. So, for example, in a nuclear family, say talk about modern world, or say talk about urban areas. If you want to buy a car for the family, or if you want to buy a washing machine for the family, everyone has an equal say. Women are also free to go outside and work, but we still see that it has not changed completely. It is still the women who take care of household chores, etc. So this is basically, you can get an idea, because a few of you might think that what are the positive and negative functions of joint families and nuclear families. Also, when we look at the size of the family in light of change, you'll find more aspects related to this. Now, if you look at the features of nuclear families and joint families, we'll find first thing that nuclear families are more of modern and industrial concepts. How? You see, with industrialization, industries will be set up. Now, as better economic opportunities come up, people tend to move out of their rural joint families or rural households and start a new family in the industrial areas. Also, with modernization, the idea of equality, the idea of racial values find an important place, and which also becomes a reason for people to tend to move towards nuclear families. Because in nuclear families, you find that is you have more sense of freedom. Because in a joint family, you have elderly, you have a big household, you have a big family, wherein somewhere or the other, your ideas, your choices get subdued in front of the family. And also, you have an obligation towards the elderly, towards, say, the leader of the family, and they are the ones who generally exercise authority. So you can understand it in terms of modernization and industrialization. And also, you can add here urbanization, because with urbanization, people tend to move towards urban areas, leaving their rural household. Whereas joint families are generally found in agrarian setup. And it is not that you won't find joint families in cities or in, say, industrial units, because you see that most of the industrial families are actually joint families. You talk about a local business, you talk about a local shop in your city, you'll generally find that they belong to a particular community. You can say, take example of your Vaishyas, or say the business class, that is generally in North India termed as Banyas. You'll find that they still tend to live in joint families. So it is not that it is primarily agrarian phenomena. No, you find joint families in the urban areas as well, and you find it in industrial society as well. Similarly, it's not that nuclear families are only present in modern industrial world. You can think of a joint family which breaks up because of the land reforms that will come to. So by then you can think about how it can impact, how your legislations like land reform can impact the structure of family. Then if we talk about husband and wife relationships, in a joint family, you see that the family at large is more important. The relationship between siblings, the relationship between elderly and the young become more important compared to the relationship between husband and wife. Another example of this is when we talk about the institution of marriage, you see that when we talk about marriage, it is generally the compatibility of the families which matters, and not the compatibility of girl and the boy. Whereas in nuclear families, you'll find it is more about the compatibility of the boy and the girl, or the bride and the groom. So therein you'll find that your bond of marriage, you can understand it as bond of marriage, is one which finds less importance in joint families, whereas in nuclear families, it finds more importance. Also, as we have already understood it as, nuclear families are egalitarian in nature. Then if we talk about parent and child relation, just think of that if it is a nuclear family, it is the child who is the one who is the primary focus of the entire family. And entire family, by entire family we mean of the mother and the father. So the mother and the father focus primarily on the children. So the bond is very strong. But whereas when it comes to joint families, you find that children are born and brought up and socialized and being taken care of by the entire family. So the parent and children bond would not be as strong as it is in nuclear families. Then if we talk about the bond between siblings, by siblings you mean brothers and sisters. So if we talk about the siblings, it is again highly valued, and also it is egalitarian in the sense that you might be from urban areas or you might be coming from a nuclear family. You see that the relationship between you and your brother, or say you and your sister, is going to be strong, and also it is egalitarian in nature. Even though your brother or your sister might be 2, 3, 4 years elder to you, but they would not exercise any form of authority over you. So yes, there can be occasional, say, leg pulling that is there, but otherwise they do not have a sense of authority over you. So yes, if you want to talk about the matters of career, that in which direction I should proceed, you will take their suggestions, but it is not that they'll exercise any authority over you. But whereas in extended or joint families, you find that this bond is on the basis of age. So generally in joint families in India, you find that the eldest male member of the family is considered to be the head of the family. One is this idea, and from here you can relate that your age matters a lot. That on the basis of age, people are put in a hierarchy. So the elder ones get to exercise authority over the younger ones. But still, you see that this bond between brothers and sisters is highly valued in extended or joint families as well. Then if we talk about division of labor, because we see family as an institution which works in a form of division of labor as well. Think about a joint family wherein the male members of the society are the sole bread earners of the family. The children are expected just to obey what the elders say. Then if we talk about the elderly, they are being taken care of by the family. Then the elderly also have an important role with respect to socialization. So there is a division of labor. Also, if you look at the female members of the family, they are primarily engaged in household work. They are supposed to take care of the various eating needs and other needs as far as the family is concerned. So there is a division of labor, a strict division of labor for that matter in joint families. But if we talk about a nuclear family, it is both male and female members of the family who take care of both the roles. So for instance, the husband will help the wife in taking care of household chores. Then also similarly, women go out and work and contribute to the economic security of the family. So in this way, you can see that in nuclear families, you have joint roles. And then if we talk about authority, in nuclear families, as already discussed, it is joint authority. So both the husband and the wife, and also not even the younger members of the family are not left behind. So take the same example of buying a television for the house. So what happens is generally your parents consult with each other and with you and ultimately reach a decision. But whereas if we talk about your joint families, it is generally the male members who exercise authority, and also it is not just the male members; it is also based on the factor of age. So the ones who are elder gets to exercise authority over others. Then here you see in authority distribution that you have something called personality-based authority. So in nuclear families, at times you find that there are strong women who exercise more authority compared to men, and this is something that you do not generally find. But yes, you have instances in the modern world. Whereas if you talk about joint families, it is never the case. The relationship between the individual and the family. If we talk about that, in joint families, you'll see that somewhere or the other, people have to compromise. The entire family has to compromise. Various individuals in the family have to compromise. So, for instance, women are compromising in the sense that they're not going out for work. They're not able to exercise authority at par with men. Then the younger ones have to compromise, or their interests get subdued because they have to follow what the elder ones say. Similarly, if you talk about a nuclear family, you'll find that generally it is not that everyone is it is not that your views, your ideas, your choices will get subdued always. No, there is an attempt to reconcile. Reconcile in the sense that, okay, yes, we cannot say let you purchase a very expensive bike or a scooter because we do not have those kind of resources. But let's do one thing. Let's buy you a cheaper one or buy you a second-hand motorcycle so that the economic resources of the family do not get strained, and also you get to have a scooter. So there is generally an attempt to reconcile. And also you see that for the sake of your education, your parents will take a lot of pain. They would leave their ideas if they want something. They'll leave that, but they invest on your education, for instance. So yes, there is an attempt to reconcile. But whereas if you talk about joint family, it is the entire family, it is the collective which matters more than an individual. So if the entire family, if the collective wants to invest more in land, or they want to invest more in agriculture, and there is an individual in the family who says that I want to go out and study, I want to go abroad and study, it is generally the collective whose ideas, whose decisions will prevail. Then if we talk about gender relationship, as already seen, that in nuclear families, you tend to go more towards equality. Also, if we talk about joint families, generally the women are subordinated. Now, these are various aspects of nuclear and joint families, and we have looked at them in comparison so that you are able to understand more. Also, if we talk about types of family, then you'll find other types of families as well. But you don't have to go a lot. For instance, there'll be families wherein say you get married and you go start living, say, with your maternal uncle or your paternal uncle, then that also constitutes a family. Then with newer forms of family that we are going to come next to, with newer forms of family, you see it is not always about these bonds of birth and marriage. There can be other bonds as well. So yes, we'll come to these post-industrial families as well, the new families that are coming up. Now we see that because of various factors, because of various forces of change, you find that the institution of family, the size of family is changing. The various other aspects related to authority are changing, which you saw slightly here in the comparison between nuclear and joint families. But what are the factors of change? Think about industrialization, setting up of new industries in India. Now, what has happened is looking for better economic opportunities, which are provided by these industries. people tend to move towards industrial areas. They go start a nuclear family there. So from joint family in the rural areas, it converts into nuclear family in industrial areas. Then you talk about urbanization, which is basically the growth of population in urban areas. You just understand it right now because urbanization is something on which we are going to have a detailed discussion. So growth of population in urban areas. Then you talk about migration of people from rural to urban areas. This is what is understood as urbanization. Now with urbanization, people start moving towards urban areas. Now it does not necessarily mean that the elderly or others in the family are left behind. It can be so that the entire joint family moves from rural area to urban area. But generally you will find that because of urbanization, it is the joint family breaks down into nuclear family. Also, I would suggest you to keep this in mind that whatever changes we are seeing in joint families, you try to keep a list in mind that how a joint family changes, because joint family you can see that changes because of various reasons. And also you already have a question in the past that we are going to discuss, which has been asked by UPSC on the joint families or how the life cycle of joint families go. That will come to towards the end of the lecture. Now going back, so one factor is industrialization. People moving to industrial areas for better economic opportunities and starting a nuclear family there. Then there is urbanization, because you see that in urban areas you have better amenities, you have better economic opportunities, you have better opportunities to get education, you have better healthcare, you have better infrastructure. Because of all these aspects, urban areas have a way of pulling people from rural areas. And you see that because of this, the composition of family changes, because it can be so that, say, there are two brothers in the family who are married, who have children. So the elder one stays there, takes care of agriculture in the village, and the younger one moves on to the city and for better economic opportunities, or maybe for education of their children. Now, also you have to remember, this is something interesting. This is something interesting in Indian society, that even though people move from joint to nuclear families, but the bond of family does not change. So say you move out of your family home, you come to an urban area, take up an occupation here. Now, if you talk about economic security of the family, you still take care of that in form of remittance. You send money to your parents so that they can lead a comfortable life. Also, if you talk about the institution of marriage, which follows, the family, the extended family still matters. All the cultural norms, etc., that you practice, the religion that you follow, the rituals that follow, they're again on the basis of what the joint family wants, what your traditional family wants. So yes, physically the joint family breaks up. People move from rural to urban areas, start nuclear families. But in terms of values, in terms of economic security, you see that in India it remains the same. That if you want to get married, you might be staying here in urban areas, you might be staying in Bangalore, Delhi. But once you decide to get married, it will be your parents, it will be your family who lead that process. And generally, people tend to get married in their ancestral home. Then if we talk about the impact of Western culture, and so you have to remember these exceptions, whatever I'm telling, so that this is the idea of sociological understanding or complete understanding of various aspects. Now, if we talk about Western culture, we see that in Western culture we have nuclear families. You generally find nuclear families, and also the different values that you find from Western culture. You talk about the idea of equality. You talk about the idea of women going out to work, which is generally followed from Western culture. So this Western culture also has an influence on us, wherein we tend to move more towards nuclear families. Also, the idea of freedom that you find in Western culture also changes families. Now, another idea about Western culture that you have to understand is take the idea of divorce. When we talk about India, and particularly Hindu families, which is the majority religion of India, you see that marriage is a bond that is considered to be unbreakable. Marriage is something sacred. Marriage is something that is an intergenerational contract, that people who get married once, they cannot get out of that arrangement. This is generally how we perceive marriage in Indian Indian society. But you see, with changing times, with influence of the West, with your legislation in the form of Hindu Marriage Act, you see that divorce has become normal now. But still, somewhere on the level of values, it is not that easily accepted. Because take an example. Generally, we find in your matrimonial websites and your newspapers that it is on the basis of caste that people post, say these marriages, or they look for matches, they seek for matches on the basis of caste. But when it comes to someone who has been divorced, you generally find written that people from any caste, will be okay, will do. So the caste won't matter. Why? Because generally, if the person is divorced, the social values are so that they are kind of looked down upon. Then this idea of divorce, which is coming from Western culture, because in Western culture, marriage is more of a contract, and you can always get out of this contract. But in India, marriage is sacred, which is changing with time. Then we talk about modern education. Now, modern education has given opportunities to women to work, has given this idea of this the sense of empowerment to women, which also changes family. Because these changes that we are talking about, you see that these are on the basis of functions, because the functions of family changing. For instance, if you talk about modern education or urbanization, you see that it is women who are also contributing to economic aspect of the family, economic security of the family. Also, you see that there are changes with respect to size of the family, that family becoming joint to nuclear. So do not just think of these changes as family changing from joint to nuclear. Also look at other dimensions that we have talked about. And that's why we are trying to have a complete discussion on this. So because of modern education, one aspect is that the status of women has improved in the family. So women are also getting more opportunities to work. They are also exercising more authority in the family. The inequalities that have been persistent in the Indian families are changing. Also with modern education, you see that families become nuclear as well. Because with modern education, children would want to move out of the home, of the family home, and go to urban areas or other cities where there are colleges and schools for better education. And also with modern education comes racialization, the idea of free development of one's personality. So when we talk about, say, your rights, or rather fundamental rights, we say that it is about the free development of one's personality, which also comes with racialization and modern education. Now, if we talk about legislative measures, we see that you can talk about the Hindu Marriage Act, wherein the family can break up, wherein the marriage can break, the family can break with divorce. Also, if you talk about other legislative measures, think about your land reforms. Now, generally, traditionally in India, you'll find that it is the eldest member of the family, eldest male member of the family, in whose name the entire property will be. Now, with land reforms and particularly land ceiling, people were not supposed to say have land beyond a certain limit, because of which the idea that people got is the ones who had more land, they thought that it is better to divide amongst the children, so that we do not fall under this land ceiling act, so that we do not lose land. because of these land reforms. So what they did was, because of land reforms, your land got divided. Now this division of land generally becomes a factor in changing the size of the family and composition of the family. Because if land is divided, one factor is if you are from a poorer household, one thing that will happen is the land size will become very small. And if the land size becomes very small, you cannot possibly produce enough even for your consumption. Forget about selling it in the market. Forget about surplus. You cannot even produce enough to consume. Then what will you do? You look for better economic opportunities. You might move to an industrial area. You might move to a city looking for better opportunities. And also, generally we find that once the eldest male member, think about a family where there is a grandfather, grandmother, then there are 3 brothers who are married and who have children. So as long as the grandparents are there, the grandparents are alive, generally the family stays together. But once the grandparents pass away, generally the family tends to break. It gets split into various nuclear families. And also when we talk about joint family, we say this idea of kitchen. A family who stays under one roof and a family who shares one kitchen. But you'll also find variations in that. You'll find that there are people who live under the same roof, but they do not share the same kitchen. Say there are 2 brothers who are married, they have wives, they have children. They start their separate kitchens in the house. Also, if we talk about the economic security or the idea of one economic unit that a joint family is, you still find increasingly that now it is various nuclear families within the joint family. So this is a larger joint family. And within that, there are, say, nuclear families. One brother, his wife and children, and then another one. So it is more of their nuclear families under this joint family. So one brother, they take care of their small family unit, that is the nuclear family, but they stay in the same ancestral house. Then also, you see that there are other specialized institutions coming up, which are also changing the structure and function of family. Think about your daycare centers. Think about your old age homes. Think about the idea of moving towards a welfare state. Now, if we talk about welfare state, in welfare state, you might understand from your polity lectures that a welfare state is something who will take care of various socio-economic needs of the members of the society, where the state will take care of them. Now, the idea of pension, old age pension, now the idea of pension for disabled is something which gives an example of welfare state. Now, if we see traditionally, taking care of the elderly, taking care of the disabled, taking care of the divorced, taking care of the widowed in the family was taken care of by the family itself. But now we see that with the increasing role of welfare state, you have various features like pensions, etc., which change the function of the family. Now, the family doesn't have to anymore take care of the economic aspect, for example, in relation to elderly. Also, if we talk about daycare centers, if we talk about old age homes, so the elderly moving to old age homes, now they'll take care of their security needs. Also, if we talk about daycare centers, wherein generally you find in cities that people live in nuclear families, both the husband and the wife work, they have children. Now, if both the husband and wife work, where do the children go? You cannot leave them alone at home. So one idea is of having a helper in the family. Also, you see that another way of doing it is that they drop off the children at the daycare center, where their various aspects, their nutrition requirements, etc., are taken care of. You have crutches, etc., wherein the socialization of children also happens. So one is the basic needs of the children are being taken care in these daycare centers. Also, the socialization mostly happens in these daycare centers. So these specialized institutions that are coming up are also bringing about change in the family. Then if you move on to the changes in function, that a few of these you might have already understood, but what we are going to add to this is the post-industrial society, the idea of post-industrial family. So someone other is saying that this affects the state finances because they have to do this all. They have to take up this function of welfare state. Doesn't it count as a negative aspect of nuclear families? Absolutely yes. So this change in function of taking care of your elderly, this change in function of the state, wherein the state assumes the responsibility of taking care of these elder members of the society, this can be understood as a negative impact on the society in the form of nuclear families. So also you see that there are other things as well that will come to once we understand these functions. And here you will actually find these. So for instance, if we talk about this aspect, of burden on the state, you see that when it comes to social security in agrarian societies, in pre-industrial societies, you find that caregiving to the ill, to the aged, was the function of the family. But now this role is assumed by the welfare state. And also, when you talk about state taking care of elderly, the costs involved, etc., that will also study when we talk about population, because elderly are one of the sections, one of the part of your vulnerable sections of society. So women are one part of your vulnerable sections that we'll discuss. Then elderly also will be taken up when we study population, because there are issues related to our aging population and elderly. Now, if we talk about your post-industrial society, again, the role of welfare state is also increasing. Also, people expect more and more from the welfare state. Just think about the demography of India. Right now, majority of our population is young, but over a period of time, the population will age, but the death rate is going to be low. What does that mean? That less and less number of people will die in the future. Reason being, better healthcare facilities available. Now, what happens to those elderly? Then the welfare state would have to increase their role as far as post-industrial society is concerned. Also, this idea of your specialized institutions. You see the number of old age homes coming up in India. This is also an indication of increase or decrease in the social security function of family in modern times. Then if we talk about traditional families, some of you might be born and brought up in joint families. You see, whenever you want to go to sleep, you'll go to your grandparents, they'll tell you a story, they'll talk about fables, they'll basically entertain you, and you'll go to sleep. So with that, one is that your socialization happens, because generally, more often than not, you'll find those stories based on moral dimensions of life. So one is your value system, another thing is entertainment. Now this aspect as well, this function of recreation, this function of entertainment is now more and more taken up by mass media. So with, between industrial and post-industrial society, you see there are not many differences, but a few significant ones. Now here as well, you find that in post-industrial society, your influence of mass media is again on the rise, and this becomes a primary factor of entertainment. And also in post-industrial society, you'll find that when you say go back to your industrial society, and now you do not think of it in terms of when exactly did industrial society change into post-industrial society. You understand it as a process. As we talk about society, the society is continuously evolving. Now, if you go 20 years back, in timeline, you'll find that there was limited scope of mass media. You had basic Doordarshan, etc. Channels that were there on television that were generally run by state. Now this mass media has also privatized. This mass media also has spread. And also you can talk about mass media being democratized in the sense that you have now social media. On social media, everyone has an option of publishing their opinions, of say negating someone else's opinions, which was primarily done previously by your state, and then slowly it got privatized, and now it is changing towards a more democratic or free social media. Now, if we talk about another function of education, in agrarian society, there was no idea of formal education. People were generally involved in agriculture, and one generation after the other used to take care of your of the agricultural aspect, that is your land, etc. Now, in modern times, you see, with the concept of modern education, with new industries coming up, and ultimately in post-industrial society, there's a high level of specialization. Now, you need to have those skills. Now, you need to have education, and people also from agricultural background have understood the importance of education. And that's how we see that in our education system, the gross enrollment ratio, or you can understand it as number of people going to take admissions, has increased. So this aspect of education in industrial society, we have this formal education, which is moving more towards specialization in post-industrial society. Whereas in agrarian society, it was generally the basic skills that were taught to the children. Then if we talk about economic cooperation, as I've already discussed that initially, if you see in agrarian sector, family is the unit of production, and whatever they produce, they consume. So family is a unit of production and consumption. Also, for this production, there was cooperation because in agriculture, everyone was involved. But this aspect of cooperation is also there in industrial families, wherein both the male and female members of the family work together. Because now when we are talking about pre-industrial, industrial, and post-industrial, we are again not differentiating between nuclear and joint families. But even in joint families in industrial setup, you talk about any family which owns an industry. So generally you'll find their joint families. One, second, you'll find that everyone contributes to that production, to that industrial unit. So the cooperation is something that is there both in pre-industrial and industrial societies. But if we say that by moving towards post-industrial society, we see that there are changes as well. Changes in this idea of cooperation, changes in this idea of pooling of resources. Because you see now that there is more push towards individualism. So the husband goes out and work, he earns something. The female member as well, the wife as well, goes out and work. She also earns some money. Now, yes, they pool their resources to a certain extent to run that household. But now you find increasingly that they do not mix their financials. So if the woman wants to get something, if the female member wants to get something from the market, now they do not have to say think about the entire structure of family, the entire economic resources combined of the family. No, they do not have to. Also, with changing structure of family in post-industrial world, and let's do that first, so that you have an idea that what kind of new families are coming up in post-industrial society. You see that new concept of live-in relationships, wherein people or the boy and the girl are not married, they live together, they stay under one roof, they share one kitchen, they pool economic resources, but they also have a sense of individuality, the sense of individualism, and they take care of their personal expenses rather than say taking care of the financials of the entire family. They take care of their personal financials. Now, in industrial society, we see that generally you'll find that most of the people are not involved in production. Most of the people have moved away from agriculture. And you see that it is now, family now becomes a unit of consumption. How? That the members of the family go out and earn some income, and that income is primarily used for consumption. Whereas in agricultural society or pre-industrial society, you see that people, the members of the family produce together and consume what they have produced. So this is how you can understand these. Then if we talk about religion, we see that moving from pre-industrial to post-industrial society, the idea of religion is on the decline. The significance of religion is on the decline. So you see that your family used to teach about religion and other things. Also, when we talk about these fable stories, etc., taught by your generally your grandparents and your uncles and aunts, you find that there was a certain aspect of religion involved there as well. So they'll talk about stories from Mahabharata, particularly in Hindu families. They'll talk about stories from Ramayana. Similarly, in other religions as well, in other religious groups as well, you'll find that religion was imparted through the socialization to the family, to the younger members of the family. But more and more, as we move towards modern and industrialized world, we find that religion has become one's personal affair. One idea is that with the breaking up of joint family, now your socialization is more and more taken up by your specialized institutions like schools. So in schools, you see that with modernization, again, the idea of education is under the forces of secularization. Education is becoming more and more secular. And you can see this. If you go to any urban center or any school here in the cities, you'll find if you ask students about religion, the chances are they would not be aware of many aspects of religion. They would not be aware of their religious and cultural practices. So we see that your religion becomes more and more private and personal affair in industrial societies and post-industrial societies. And now in post-industrial society, you see that we are moving further away from religion. That the discussions now are that why at all do we need religion? Also, we see that in industrial society, there has been an emergence of cults and various sects. So rather than understanding it as just majority religions, you see that newer, smaller cults and sects have evolved, wherein people become a member of those. Now, if we talk about newer forms of family in post-industrial society, because generally post-industrial society is not covered, but now we see the kind of questions that are being asked, we have to change the pattern of our studies. Now, if we talk about post-industrial society, one idea of a different family or a newer form of family is, that I've already told you, is live-in relationship. In live-in relationships, now when I was talking about the definition, I was saying that these definitions also continuously evolve. So where in the definition we were saying that family is something that is joint, that is formed by the bond of marriage. Now in live-in relationships, there is no bond of marriage. Say a boy and a girl living together, sharing their financial resources, pooling their economic resources, sharing one kitchen, sharing one roof, but they are not married. This is what a live-in relationship is. So this is a newer form of family that has come up in post-industrial society. Now please suggest what are other forms of families that have come up in post-industrial society. Just think about it. That what newer forms of family you see in post-industrial society apart from live-in relationship. Same-sex marriage. That's good. Single parents, great. Co-living, good. So you can just have a basic idea about this so that you understand that not just the size, not just the structure, but various other aspects of family are changing in the post-industrial society. Now, when we talk about same-sex marriage, because traditionally we thought of marriage as thought of marriage, or thought of family as this bond of marriage as something between people from opposite sex, a girl and a boy getting married. But now you see that there is this concept of same-sex marriage, wherein a boy and a boy gets married, a girl and a girl get married, and there are other dimensions to it that will take up with vulnerable sections. Then also you have single parents. For example, lone father, that it is only the father or children. Then you have lone mother, mother and children, and there is no husband. Similarly, you have co-living. Co-living, you just understand this idea. Some of you might be working in cities, might be sharing your flat, might be sharing the house with your friends or with someone from your same company or same organization. What is that? Co-living, wherein people are living together, they share financial resources, they share one kitchen, they stay under one roof, and they are not related by either of the bonds. So in live-in relationship, we were saying that they are not related by the bond of marriage. In co-living as well, they are again not related by any of the bonds. They are not related, say they are not siblings, they are not married, etc. So the first idea of post-industrial society is live-in relationships, wherein a girl and a boy live together without getting married, and they share all the resources. Then there is idea of same-sex marriage, wherein two people from the same sex who belong to the same sex get married and stay together. Then you have this idea of single parents, wherein there is one, there can be either father and children or mother and children, and no other members in family. Then co-living is take idea of flatmates. You can use this as example. So you might be studying in a college somewhere and sharing a flat or a room with one of your friends. What is that? Co-living. Also, there can be newer ideas, newer forms of family. So take example. I'm just giving an example. You don't have to remember everything. You just have to have a fair idea so that you are able to cite examples if a question on the changing nature of family comes. So think about this. A husband and wife, they're living together. They have children. Now they get divorced for some reason. They do not want to live together. Now say the father gets the custody of children. The father gets to keep the children with him. And the father decides to get married again. The father looks for another match and decides to get married again. Now you see that the girl to whom, or the woman to whom the father gets married, becomes the stepmother of the children. So this can be a newer idea, because this is something that you do not see. Because generally, traditionally in Indian families, what used to happen was if say the husband, generally there was no concept of divorce, not before 1955 at least. So it was considered sacred. People did not break up marriages, and even today you find that it is not that easy to break a marriage, at least in the rural areas. Now one disadvantage of nuclear families can be understood as marriage becoming contractual, the frequent breaking up of marriages. Now in joint families, you see that it was more of a social practice, wherein two families are involved, wherein the families are considered to be the stakeholders. They are the ones who exercise a subtle pressure over the couple and would not let them break up. But now in nuclear families, you do not have any such idea. You do not have any such pressure. And with the idea of freedom, with the modern ideas from Western culture, we find that divorce is becoming common in urban areas at least. And which is not a problem, but the problem is it is becoming very frequent. And previously, if we talk about divorce, traditionally, what used to happen was that if, say, divorce happens, if there is ultimately a divorce, people did not tend to get married again. But now you see with the divorces happening frequently, people tend to get married to, say, another partner, which is also a changing aspect. So I hope these ideas are clear. So how a single man and woman can bring up children? You can think about adoption. You can think about someone getting divorced and getting custody of the children. Right? You can think about someone not getting married and bearing an illegitimate children. So there can be various ways in which single parents can have children. So in this way, we have understood what we have done is we understood the idea of family. Yes, so someone is giving a good example of biotechnology, where using that you can bear children. So if we talk about family, now the first thing that we did was we talked about various features of family. What is the definition of family? Then we talked about various functions of family. Then we talked about what were the criticisms, for instance, trauma, etc., of these functions of family. Then we discussed what are the various types of families that are found in the society, out of which we primarily took up nuclear and joint families, because this is something that you see where most of the changes are made. Because till now we see that generally either it is patriarchal, patrilocal, patrilineage, and at times you find neolocal in urban areas. So not a lot has changed there apart from the values, apart from the relationship between the young and the old, relationship between women and men. And we took up nuclear and joint families on the basis of size, that how the joint families are breaking up into smaller nuclear families. Now, nuclear families and joint families, we looked at their functions, we looked at various other characteristics. Then we talked briefly about the positive and negative side of it. And now I believe that with the entire change that we have understood, you'd be in a position to tell what is positive, what is negative. Also, then we looked into various factors which affect this institution of family, be it in terms of size, be it in terms of function. So various forces like industrialization, we talked about various legislative measures like land reforms, etc. Then we moved on to talk about these changing functions of family, and wherein we also introduced post-industrial family, which is slightly different compared to your industrial families. Now, here are a few examples for you, wherein you can see that various type of families, newer types of families are coming up. And this is a little data talking about how how there have been changes in types of family over the years. For instance, the couple-only family with no children is increasing. Similarly, single parents are increasing. If we move from 1983 to 2015, then single mother with children, these kind of families are also on the rise. Then these are lone father or single father families, which also you'll find prevalent in the society. Now, with this, we have concluded our discussion on family. Now, one of the bond in family that we're talking about was that of marriage. And again, we have to understand marriage as an institution. So a lot of things, a lot of ideas will follow from the idea of family, because when we talk about family, we generally tend to discuss this bond as well. Not that we focus solely on this bond of marriage, but yes, we do talk about the bond of marriage, the bond of birth, etc. Now, if we talk about marriage as an institution, we see that it admits men and women into family, legitimizing offsprings. What does that mean? That a boy and a girl getting married, and you generally see that your wedding ceremonies are associated with this legitimizing. That generally across societies it is considered that offsprings or your children should come from a legitimate relationship, a relationship that is being recognized by the society. And now this legitimizing, the idea of legitimation is not just in terms of society, not just in terms of society, but also it has legal backing. So you have to see that you have to register your families legally as well. Now, if we talk about a marriage, so a boy and a girl get married if they have offspring in the future, because now it is not necessarily the case. If you look at this definition, it will look a little old. Why? Because giving birth to children is not the only function of family, and also it is increasingly being seen that a lot of couples do not go for children. Then also you see that in this bond of marriage, both the parties, that is girl and the boy, have certain rights and obligations with respect to each other and with respect to this institution of marriage. Also, you see that when we talk about family, this bond of marriage, we're primarily talking about men and women here, but you see that it is not necessarily men and women, and it can be same-sex marriages as well, which are now legal. So, of marriage, this bond of marriage will basically legitimize the offsprings if they go for any, and also they'll establish basic rights and obligations of both the husband and the wife or both the partners. And rather than rather than saying men and women, now you can use the term partners, which sounds and is more inclusive. Now, again, if we talk about various functions of marriage, the first one that comes directly from family is that of sexual gratification and legitimizing. Because think of sex as a biological urge, a biological need. And to get into this relationship, to get into this physical relationship, or to satisfy your biological urge of sex, you have to have a legitimate relationship. Now, you can say that with live-in relationships or other forms of family, which do not generally find social legitimization, you can say that, yes, the function of sexual gratification is being carried out without getting married as well. Take idea of live-in relationships. So one of the functions is sexual gratification, but now this function is not just a matter of the institution of marriage. Now it can be taken care of without getting married as well. Then we talk about procreation, that is giving birth. Now it is again one of the functions of marriage, because after marriage, your offsprings become legitimate. But also you see that one idea is procreation or giving birth to children without marriage is one aspect. One aspect is that of illegitimate children. These are newer ideas, that giving birth to children without getting married, starting a family without getting married, and giving birth to children without getting married. So in the strict sense of the word, you'll find that it'll be considered illegitimate. But now you see that as your live-in relationships, think about live-in relationships. Now they have a legal backing in the sense that with respect to a Domestic Violence Act, they also mention about live-in relationships where domestic violence can be checked. Then also other idea is, now we talk about giving birth to children, it is not necessarily the case. Now you'll find increasing cases of couple-only families without any children. So yes, these are functions of marriage, but these functions are also changing. So we'll start looking at these functions in the light of change right from the beginning, because you can follow this from the family, from the concept of family. Then if we talk about economic cooperation and security, you see that inside this family, with this bond of marriage, they have certain rights and obligations, out of which you see economic cooperation and taking care of each other's social security, taking care of each other's emotional needs becomes one of the important aspects. So these are basic functions of marriage that have been performed in the past, and now increasingly that I mentioned that psychological support or psychological aspect or emotional support was not considered to be a major function of the family, but it is increasingly being looked up to, because with modernizing forces, with the idea of individualism spreading, you find that more and more people need emotional support, and family as an institution and rather marriage is looked more as a matter of emotional support as well. Now we'll talk about various types of marriage. Now before we start with various types of marriage, you also understand that because a few people are talking about religion as well and caste as well. Yes, with caste system we saw that increasingly you find more and more number of people are getting married intercaste, getting married in another caste. Also, there are interreligious marriages as well. And again, if we talk in terms of religion, it is that we'll come to religion with communalism. But you understand that the changing nature is, if you see changing nature everywhere, with religion as well, you find a lot of atheists coming up. But we'll not have to get into those dimensions right now. You can take it up later. Also, increasingly, marriages are being looked upon as legal contracts. The changing nature, you have seen that previously it was considered sacred in Indian society, and now you see that they're becoming more and more contractual in nature. So I hope you are able to follow. Now, if you look at types of marriage, one simple idea is that of monogamy, which says one man getting married to. So a boy and a girl getting married is the idea of monogamous marriage or monogamy. Mono means can relate it to one. You see, the boy and a girl getting married is the most popular way of getting married across the world. Also with monogamy, now rather than thinking of it as one man and woman, you can think of one boy and a boy, one girl and a girl. So keep those things in mind as well. Then the other idea is, what if there is one man and more than one woman? Say there are 5 women. Or what if there are 5 men who get married to one woman? Because this is also a case that you can think about. So the other idea is polygamy. Polygamy means having more than one partner. More than one partner. So one can be a man getting married to more than one woman. Similarly, it can be more than one man getting married to one woman. So if you talk about first idea, it is of polyandry. And you can link it to men for that matter, wherein you see that one girl or one woman is getting married to more than one man. So a girl or a female marrying more than one husband, having more than one husband, can be considered as polyandry. And this is an example that you can find. Say, take example of Mahabharata. Then you find that one girl, Draupadi, getting married to more than one man, the Pandavas, the 5 brothers. Now, if those men, the husbands of this female, if they are brothers, it is called fraternal polyandry. And if they are not brothers, it is called non-fraternal see the examples of non-fraternal polyandry can be found in Nayars of Kerala. We can talk about this practice in Tibet for that matter, and you have other examples as well. So these are a few examples of types of marriage. Also, then this idea of polygyny, that is more than one wife, a man having more than one wife, that is a man marrying more than one partner. So if you see, you have examples from various, say you have examples from the ancient past, you have examples today as well. So again, when you talk about polygamy, you also have to remember one more thing, that this more than one partner at the same time. What does that mean? If someone gets divorced and marries again, that is not called polygamy. If one of the partner dies and the other partner marries someone else, it is not called polygamy. Polygamy is when the marriage, these multiple bonds of marriage exist at the same time. So someone getting married to more than one partner at the same time is the idea of polygamy. So do not confuse the idea of serial, because that is understood as, you do not have to remember, I'm just mentioning so that you understand, not have to remember, again I'm repeating, the idea of serial monogamy. Idea of serial monogamy is one of the partner marries another partner on divorce or loss or death of the other partner. So a boy got married to a girl, they get divorced, and the boy goes on marrying another girl. What does that mean? That is serial monogamy. So not have to get into the dimensions beyond this. You just have to understand, yes, this is something happens. And also, if you see, if we talk about serial monogamy, now when we say that initially the idea of marriage was considered sacred, there was no breaking up, then came the idea of divorce. Yes, you can get separated, but you see, there you'll generally find the practice was, if say a woman gets widowed, someone dies, if her partner dies, generally she was made to marry the brother of that brother of her husband. If the husband dies, brother of the husband assumes the responsibility for taking care of the woman and getting into the bond of marriage. Similarly, if the woman dies, if the wife dies in a relationship, it was considered as so generally the sister of wife would be married to the boy. So the idea of girl getting widowed and marrying the brother of her husband, this practice is called levirate. And if the brother dies, if the woman dies, if the wife dies, then the husband getting married to sister of his wife, the practice is called sororate. These rules of spouse selection will come to, but just to give you an idea here. So now we see that with divorces happening frequently in the post-industrial society, people tend to go for serial monogamy. It is not just one life partner for life, that once you get divorced, you are not going to remarry. No, now you can remarry. And generally you find that with increasing divorces, and this is something you can think about in future, that with increasing divorces, this is a practice, the practice of serial monogamy, which is on the rise. So not remember it with names, etc., but understand it as an idea. So these are the types of marriage which you'll find. Also, when you go through the chart, you'll find that various kinds of marriages. If we say that polygyny, yes, we can say that polygyny and polygamy, for that matter, is on the decline. Now it is monogamy or monogamous marriage. Now it is more of monogamous marriage, which is prevailing. But still, you'll find it prevalent across the Indian society. And there are another reasons for the same. Now with polygamy, if you think about polygamy, there can be multiple reasons. Just think about Tibet. In Tibet, what happens is the ones who are living on highlands, ones who are living on, say, hills, if someone is from the lowlands or someone from the plains goes up to live there, they would not be able to survive because of the harsh climatic conditions. And I hope you can understand that, what the temperatures, how the temperatures go, etc. So the harsh living conditions on the hills started this practice, that why not marry someone from the hills itself. With that started the practice of fraternal and non-fraternal polyandry, wherein a girl was made to marry more than one husband. Girl was made to have more than one husband because she's from the same land and she can get married. And again, this polyandry, you can think about polyandry. Another idea behind polyandry, or another reason for polyandry, don't you think your sex ratio can be a reason for polyandry? Now, in parts of Haryana, not very prevalent today, but in parts of Haryana, you should find that in the past, there was this polyandry, practice of polyandry that was prevalent. Reason being sex ratio. That the number of girls are very less, the number of female members in the society are less, and men do not generally find sexual partners or partners for marriage easily. Hence, the practice of polyandry. Also, the practice of polygyny can be related to your wars, because generally it was the men who used to fight in wars, and during wars, you know that there are many casualties. So this practice of polygyny primarily started, or you can look at it in the light of wars, wherein now the women are left behind, the men passed away in wars. Now it'll be one man who would have to take care of multiple women and get into this bond of marriage. So I hope you understand. Also, as I was talking about the idea of poverty related to this. Now with poverty, people not being able to maintain families. So this idea of polygamy can come into picture as well. So this is a good observation, and yes, you can add it to the idea behind this. But now if we see that increasingly monogamous marriages are being given preference, but in the future we can see with the rise in cases of divorces, you can see that we are going to move a little more towards serial polygamy, serial monogamy. Sorry, I correct myself. Serial monogamy. So you can look at this prevalence of various practices across the country. Now let's talk about these rules of spouse selection. If we talk about these rules of spouse selection, you see that there can be either prescriptive, that okay, this is the preferred way to find a partner, and another one can be prohibitive. Now think about prohibition first. Now think about the idea of marrying someone from the family, marrying someone to whom you are either say related by birth or rather related by blood. Think about siblings getting married. Think about a mother and son getting married, or a father and daughter getting married. Do you think it is, say, acceptable? Generally, it is not. And across the globe, you'll find that this practice of incest taboo, wherein, say, marrying inside family, and rather marrying inside your nuclear family, this is prohibited. But you do find exceptions that you not have to worry about. In India, you can think of it as prohibited. So incest taboo, when one marries someone inside their nuclear family, that can be, say, daughter and father, that can be mother and son, that can be siblings. So this is prohibited. Another thing is we talked about the idea of caste, wherein you're not supposed to marry outside your caste or the same social group, or you're not supposed to marry outside your religion. What is that? Endogamy. Similarly, there is exogamy. In North India particularly, you will find, and I'll give you an example from Haryana. So for instance, if you are from this village, if you belong to this village, first thing is you cannot marry anyone from this village. You cannot marry anyone from your mother's lineage, that is your mother's caste. You cannot marry anyone from your father's caste because they're considered brothers and sisters. Then again, you cannot even marry people from the neighboring villages because it is assumed that in the past, these people who are in this region, who are living in this village and maybe the neighboring villages, they might have belonged to the same clan and hence same blood lineage. So this is the idea of exogamy, wherein there is a prohibition of marrying inside one's own social group. Prohibition on marrying inside own social group. Now, do not get confused between these two ideas. Endogamy says that you cannot marry outside your social group, which is generally with respect to your tribe, caste, and religion. And the idea of exogamy says that you cannot marry inside your own social group. And these social groups can be village, clan, etc. So I hope this example helps you with that. Then also with respect to your caste system, you'll find that one, there was a restriction on intercaste marriages, but slowly so the number of intercaste marriages started increasing. Now with that, there are two ways of getting married intercaste. One is that a girl can marry someone from a higher caste. And also there can be one way in which the girl marries someone from a lower caste. Now, if we talk about girl marrying someone from a higher caste, it is called hypergamy or anulom vivah in Hindi. That's in Sanskrit how this is how we call it. So, which is not that prohibited. So, with time, it was acceptable. It became acceptable. But then there is this idea of hypogamy or pratilom vivah, wherein a girl marries someone from a lower caste, which is still more or less prohibited. Yes, you do find exceptions. Yes, you do find it because right now we see that intercaste marriage itself is an exception because more and more number of people still marry inside their own caste, and it is mostly an urban phenomenon. But in that, there are two ways. So, girl can marry someone from a higher caste, which is still allowed, which has more, say, social acceptance. But then there is other way in which girl marries someone from a lower caste, which is not accepted to that extent. Then other ways, then the prescriptive ways or the preferred kinds of marriages or rules of spouse selection are these, which will come to. Two of these, which we have already told with respect to your widows and widowers, that is the practice of levirate and sororate, and have given examples here as well that you can see. Then another idea is parallel cousin and cross cousin marriage. Now think about this. This is your father, your mother, children. Then you have your paternal uncle, their children. Then you can have your maternal uncle, children, also maternal and children, paternal and children. Now, do not get confused. I'll just make it simple for you. Now, you have cousins. The ones you call cousins are generally either your uncles or aunts' children. Now, your uncle can be either paternal or maternal. Similarly, your aunts can be either maternal or paternal. Maternal means on your mother's side, sister of your mother. Then paternal means sister of your brother, sister of the husband. Sorry, paternal means brother of the husband. Right. So you find. So I myself got confused. So yes, no wonder you might get confused as well. So, okay. So if we talk about cross cousins and parallel cousins, you see that on your father's side, you have your cousins. If you go on marrying those cousins, it is called parallel cousin marriage. That means on your father's side, the cousins that you have, that is your paternal cousins, children of your paternal uncle and aunt, you find if you marry them, it is called parallel cousin marriage, which is preferred in Muslims in India. Then if we talk about cross cousin marriage, that is marrying your cousin from your maternal uncle or your paternal aunt. This is called cross cousin marriage. Yeah, so if you use these terms, chacha, chachi, mama, mami, that is not going to help everyone because there is different say names that we call across the country. So yes, so let's understand them primarily as maternal and paternal, uncle, aunts, etc. Now, cross cousin marriage is something that you find generally in South India, wherein they prefer marrying the children to either the sister's brother, that is the maternal uncle, or the father's sister, that is the paternal aunt. Whereas if we talk about parallel cousin marriage, which is generally found prevalent in Muslim, you find that the children are either married to the maternal aunt's children, or paternal uncle's children. Now, the idea behind these parallel cousin and cross cousin marriages are to keep the wealth inside the family, to keep the wealth inside that extended family, so that it doesn't go out of the family. That is what generally the idea behind these parallel cousin and cross cousin marriages is. In paternal relation, they become brothers and sisters. Then how come they marry a person? Yes, it is prevalent. So in paternal relation, when we are talking about say parallel cousin marriages, yes, it is prevalent in Muslims. So you can have examples. It is not that that they can marry their say maternal aunts. It is that children of maternal aunt. That is their cousins. That's why you're calling it parallel and cross cousin marriage. You're not talking about marrying your aunts and uncles. Okay, so these are various rules of spouse selection. And again, if you talk about marriage, the institution of marriage, we have already talked about that. Now it is more and more the relationship or the compatibility between the girl and the child, the girl and the boy, which matters. Now it is not primarily the compatibility between the families, but more compatibility between girl and the child. And we'll also discuss changes in marriage. Also, you see that even though we say that these changes are happening, but we see there is a certain continuity with respect to these changes as well. The spouse selection you do not have to worry about. This is just to give you an idea. The chances are very few that a direct question can be asked on this. Now we'll start with our changes in marriage, discussion on changes in marriage after the break. Let's take a break for 15 minutes and meet at 8:05 and continue our discussion on changes in marriage. Please make sure that you come back by 8:05 because so that we don't have to wait for another few minutes. Try to log in back if you're leaving the class before 8:05 so that we start right away. so that we can help you with mail. Okay, welcome back. One announcement again. So you would have received your feedback form on mail, and if you haven't, you can just drop a mail and request the same. Please fill this feedback form and send it across today so that we can help you with improving on whatever aspects you highlight. Okay, so I think a few of you are still confused about cross cousin and parallel cousin marriage. So if we talk about parallel cousins and cross cousins, so marrying either your parallel cousin or cross cousin. If we talk about parallel cousin, these are your cousins from your paternal uncle or maternal aunt. Then you have your cross cousins who are either from your paternal aunt or maternal uncle. You find a lot of examples of cross cousin marriages across the country and particularly South India. Whereas you find parallel cousin marriage generally prevalent in Muslims in India. So again, you do not have to remember all these types, but you should know, that yes, these are the kind of practices that are prevalent. And Sachin has given a good acronym to help you remember. So he says when you talk about parallel cross cousins and parallel cousin, so parallel cousin, Tuma. That'll be a helpful way to remember. Okay, so let's talk about the changes that are happening in this institution of marriage. A few have already been highlighted, but let's look at everything together. And again, you have to remember what were the say factors responsible for the same, and we'll try to link those factors right away. So if we talk about the change in marriage, first thing that you see is that polygamous marriages are on the decline, and it is generally monogamy which is prevalent now. And also in monogamy, we are saying that with time, with the number of divorces that are increasing, we can see that people will go for serial monogamy. Then we talk about selection of spouse. You see that now it is done by the boy and the girl involved. Now it is more about the compatibility of girl and the boy rather than family. Because in traditional institution of marriage, we said that it is compatibility of families which matters. So it is basically the class of the families which matters. Now it is more about how comfortable they are, how compatible they are. And also you see in this practice, you find that previously it was generally told by the elders or the family that okay, you are supposed to marry this girl or marry this boy, and you had to go about that. Now, even at times it can be love marriages wherein it is up to you. It is completely you who decides that this is the partner I want to marry. But also, if you see that there has been a little, you say, dent in the authority of parents and elderly in that respect as well. For instance, if we talk about arranged marriages today as well, we see that the girl and the boy are made to meet each other. They discuss, they talk to each other, they talk about various aspects of life. How do they want to see the career in the future? How do they want to live together, etc. And now, basis that, they decide whether they want to marry or not, which is opposite, which is different as compared to how the practice was done previously. Then comparative merit of boy and girl rather than status of the family. But also you have to remember with this that you see that changes are happening, but it is not that we have completely shifted to self-selection of spouses or we have completely shifted to say interclass or intercaste marriages. No, we have to remember that these changes are happening slowly and steadily. Then you find intercaste marriages prevalent today and more so in urban areas. Then interreligious marriages have again become more acceptable now. But you still find that with respect to your intercaste and interreligious marriages, you still find that it is your on your matrimonial websites and your newspapers, generally you find listings in the name of caste or religion, that someone is seeking a match for a suitable girl from this caste or this religion. Then the age of marriage has increased now. Previously, you see that child marriage was prevalent, but then child marriage was banned. This practice was stopped, but still the age of marriage was less. But now with education, the girl, they have to get educated as well. They get to their colleges, then they start working somewhere. And with these things, with these forces, you see that age of marriage has increased. Now you cannot possibly marry somewhere, at least in urban areas, at a younger age. Then also, if you see that your Hindu marriage was considered indissoluble before, it was unbreakable, it was a sacred bond. But then your Hindu Marriage Act of 1955 stopped this practice, and now the Hindu marriages has again become contractual. And in this regard, you also have to see that when we talk about marriages now, the value system is also changing. Because when we talk about society, we don't just have to talk about various institutions and the legal practices. We think about the value system as well. So if we think in terms of values, now divorces have become more acceptable. Now again, it is more of a contractual bond rather than a sacred bond. So this from sacred to contractual. So this is also a change which is happening. Also, if you see that with forces of modernization and with legislation, the practice of dowry has been stopped. But again, if you look in the society, it is still prevalent. There have been changes, but you still find it prevalent in society today. And also, this is another example when I say that legislations need not, or social changes do not follow legislation, or legislations need not necessarily bring social changes. So the practice of dowry, for instance, then again we see that now intercaste marriage is permissible, but still you do not find a lot of changes on the ground happening, particularly in the rural areas. Then you see that with respect to marriage, if you talk about gender inequality, with respect to marriage and family, in terms of gender inequality, we see that women are not considered equal in the domestic sphere. They were not considered equal partners in the family or equal partners in the marriage. They had less authorities or less say in matters of family. Then they were limited to household work. But now this thing is changing. Our families are becoming more egalitarian now. Now also we talk about different other aspects as well. Just think about the role that technology plays today. Because when it comes to marriage, it comes to spouse selection as well that we have discussed. And about spouse selection, if you see that you see increasing role of technology, you see matrimonial websites offering video calling features, etc., which is also bringing about changes in the institution of marriage. Because the institution of marriage is not just two people getting married; it involves a process of spouse selection, etc. So you have to see that even that process is changing. And again, if we talk about other types of marriages as well, they are also on the rise, because here you can talk about same-sex marriage, same-sex marriages. This is another change that you can think of. Then we had also discussed about other features of families in post-industrial society, and basis that you can see that the bond of marriage, yes, it is important, but you see that it is continuously being challenged. That with your live-in relationships, the bond of marriage or the function of marriage has weakened. So these were various changes. And also when I say that you have to be aware what all you are covering in the syllabus, because at times you find various articles in the news that are directly related to your topics, and you can take down notes and add it to the respective chapter. So you can see we have already talked about these changes, and you can see that you can how you can use those aspects, how you can use those things in your content. Now let's first talk about the questions. Let's first discuss the questions related to these two institutions, and then we'll move on to diversity in India and unity in diversity. Now look at this question. When we were talking about joint family and the breaking down of joint family, I was talking about a question that has been asked in the past. So if you look at this question, it is about the life cycle of a joint family, which depends on economic factors and social values. But the question says the life cycle of a joint family depends more on economic factors rather than social values. Discuss. Now to answer this question, the first thing that we have to do is, and also you can also please try to answer, what are the various factors first? What do you think are the various factors affect joint family or the structure of joint family? Let's list down the factors first. Okay. What are the factors that affect joint family? Land reforms. Good. Then you're talking about urbanization, modernization, industrialization, etc. What else? Then you have education. Okay. Racialization, globalization, Western culture, shift from agriculture, that is already there in industrialization. Then with respect to changes in marriage, in the structure of marriage. Now let's first see, let's first talk about these factors. How do they affect the life cycle of a joint family? And then we'll categorize them into social and economic factors. And then we'll see which factors weigh heavily with respect to the life cycle of a joint family. Okay, so let's take up these few factors, and because these things have already been discussed, so let's understand. Let's talk about land reforms, which are primarily economic in nature. So if we talk about land reforms, we have already seen that land reform also lead to breaking up of the joint family. How do they do that? We talk about land reforms, we say that land gets divided among children, and also you see that sooner or later they tend to break the family. Then again, if you talk about industrialization, because of industrialization, you find new economic opportunities, and for those economic opportunities, the joint families break. Then if we talk in terms of education, you can link it directly to the newfound opportunities for work, and then also status of women. And about changes in marriage, we can talk about various new marriages that have come up. But now you see that these are factors, yes, which affect joint family. But what we have to do is we have to think in terms of economic factors and social values. And if we talk about various economic factors, think about not getting enough produce from the land, so that one brother has to move out of the home, go to urban areas or industrial areas, and start working there for economic opportunities. Then you can talk about other economic factors like education of other socio-economic factors like education of children, etc., which weigh heavily on your economic resources, which becomes an economic factor with respect to breaking up of joint life cycle of joint family. Then if we talk about social values, that people, if you see that generally tend to live in groups or in joint families for various other aspects, for say your social security, and you see with time the change in these social values, say the respect that we give to our elderly, the idea of freedom, emancipation of women or women empowerment. You see that these are also factors which contribute to life cycle of or breaking up of life cycle of a joint family. So this is one way. So right now we're talking about breaking up of a joint family. This is one way of looking at it. Now there's another way. Just think about this. During the COVID lockdown, you find that people had to move back to rural areas. The parents, say, were living alone, or their parents and their siblings were living there. They had their nuclear family here in the cities, and they moved back to those rural areas. And some of them might have decided of not coming back. Some of them might have decided of staying there with their parents, with their siblings in a joint family. So there can be economic factors and other forces of change which can contribute to the other side of the joint family, that is making or creating joint family from a nuclear family. Another example someone is giving is getting laid off from the jobs. That can also contribute to creation of a joint family. So when you look at this question, because you have understood various social and economic factors, the first thing is that you have to understand is that you do not have to look at the life cycle of a joint family only in terms of breaking it. You can make it back as well. And there can be social values there as well. There can be people who are living outside for many years, and one fine day they feel that no, we want to live with our parents. We have to live with our parents. Maybe some of them might have watched the movie Bagban, and they would have felt that okay, we should be the ones who should be taking care of our parents. That is what social values. Now, what we have to do in this question is that the question talks about the tilt more towards economic factors. It says that joint family life cycle depends more on economic factors than social values. So what we have to do is majority of our answer, majority of the weightage is to be given to economic factors, even though it is discussed, but we cannot still miss out on social values. So when you conclude your question, now if you think about this question in terms of introduction, body, and conclusion, now a basic introduction can be introduction which will follow with this is that joint family, life cycle of joint family has to be looked into from both sides. Breaking up of joint family and formation of joint family again. So this can be an introduction. After that, we talk about various factors which affect the life cycle of a joint family. Because when we talk about various factors that affect life cycle of a joint family, we do not have to necessarily mean that okay, these factors will lead to breaking up of a joint family, because they can lead to creation of joint family as well. So you can use these examples that we have used. For example, layoffs that someone has given. I forgot the name. And then you can talk about say your experience from COVID-19, which can also lead to making creation of joint family. Then what you have to do is, in the conclusion, and you can say take 80% here, and in the conclusion, what you have to do is you talk briefly about various social values that also affect, that also change the life cycle of a joint family. So when we are talking about layoffs, think about someone working in urban areas getting laid off from their job. Now they do not have any job or any economic opportunity left in the city. Them going back to their rural household, going back to live with their parents. That is what layoffs mean. So in terms of introduction, body, and conclusion. Introduction, as already discussed, can be more about the life cycle of the joint family. That the joint family can be created, can break up and can be formed again. That is one aspect. Then in body, you talk about various factors. Various factors like what? Various factors like that we have mentioned here, and you have these factors mentioned previously as well. Wherein the factors that you are going to write are going to be economic. Because when you talk about layoff, you talk about the economic side of it, for instance. But briefly in the conclusion, you talk about factors which are related to your social values that I've given example from. Right? So social values like say love, care, and affection for your parents, for the elderly, for instance. Then there can be other social values. You see that when there is a marriage that happens, for instance, you talk about new local families. Again, marriage being a social institution, primarily affecting the social life because of marriage or because of divorce, change in the joint family structure. So you can come from there. And if you remember, we have mentioned these with respect to joint families. Okay, so I think it's there a little more behind. So yes, you can see that these factors have already been discussed, and here as well, you get a fair idea how to go about this. Now the introduction has to be very brief. Reason being, it is only of 10 marks, and you have to write somewhere around 150 to 170 words. And you don't have to completely support the statement in intro. As I've already told you that in conclusion, we can conclude on a balanced note. In the intro, we can talk about breaking up and formation of a joint family life cycle. Then we focus primarily on economic factors in the body, and briefly in the conclusion, we talk about various other social values on which it depends. So I hope you got a fair idea about this question, and this is a question that you can try to write. Now, the next dimension that we are going to discuss is diversity in India. Now, if we talk about diversity in India, it is one, a salient feature of the Indian society, and also as a standalone topic mentioned in the syllabus. So if we talk about diversity in India, one thing that you have to remember is we're not going to get into the factual details of how many languages are available, what is the percentage of tribals, etc. We'll focus more towards the conceptual dimension of this question, of this feature of this diversity in India. And if you have any questions so far, please let me know from the previous things that we have discussed, that is family and marriage. So starting about diversity in India, we say that the first thing that we have to understand is what is diversity. Along with it, we'll try to understand what is uniformity and also what is unity. So we'll understand these things and then we'll proceed with this. Now, diversity is something which marks collective differences between two groups. For instance, now on an individual level, we might have various differences between each other. We might be racially different, we might speak different languages, etc. But when we talk about diversity, we talk about collective differences. Collective differences in the sense social groups are involved now. It is not about individual, it is not diversity on an individual level, it is more about collective diversity, collective differences. That think about people from one religion and another religion. Now, what do these people have in common? The religion. Say Hindus. Then there are other group of people who are Christians. And these people have collective differences on the basis of religion. Then you can have linguistic groups. You can have linguistic groups on the basis of language. That a group of people speaking Bengali, other group of people speaking Kannada. So diversity is what? These collective differences which mark off one group from the other. Now, if diversity is collective differences, uniformity is similar. Uniformity means uniform. You can understand it from the uniforms of your police, from the uniforms that you used to wear in school, from the uniforms that you see in service sector, particularly hospitality. What does that mean? That when we talk about uniformity, it is about similar traits. It is about cultural similarities. It is not necessarily in terms of uniform or the dress that you wear. We talk about cultural similarities as well. So uniformity and diversity, the differences. Diversity talks about collective differences. Uniformity talks about collective similarities. Both are with relation to social groups. Now, if we talk about unity, unity is rather than looking similar. Unity is more about integration. Integration on a deeper level. Unity is not merely looking similar. Unity is not merely uniformity, because these words are at times used interchangeably that we should not. So unity is something where we talk about the idea of integration. For example, the idea of India and the idea of united India. There can be two ideas: the idea of uniform India, and then there can be an idea of united India. So if we talk about uniform India, then we have to take away all the cultural differences, all the diversity. Everyone has to be similar. What is that? The idea of uniform India. So everyone has to look similar. And then when we talk about the idea of united India, everyone has to have that sense of belongingness, has to have that sense of cooperation among each other. So the idea of integration is unity, the idea of similarity is uniformity, and the idea of differences is diversity. Now with this brief idea, because this is something, this idea that is going to help you write answers, that is going to help you tackle any kind of question that comes from diversity in India. Now before that, let's talk about what kind of diversity that we find in India. Now you can say that we find religious diversity. You have multiple religions. Say you have majority Hindus. Then after that you have Muslims. And similarly, you have various other religions like Sikhism, Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism. So various people from various religions are there in India. We have a diversity of religion. Then when we talk about language, you know that we are a multilingual society for that matter. And then now when we talk about religion, also what you have to see is that the distribution as well is diverse. The distribution is not uniform of various religious groups across the country. For instance, if we talk about Northeast, you'll find Northeast and southern part of the country, you'll find you have majority of Christians. The Christians, most of the Christians are distributed there. And when you talk about, say, Hindus, that you'll find is more or less uniform across the country. But then again, there are regional differences. Then if we talk about religion, then if we talk about language, you find that we have a few major languages. Then we have English, and also we have a lot of dialects that are being spoken across the country. So we have a diversity in terms of language as well. And also we see that when we talk about linguistic diversity, we see that particularly in the urban centers, people tend to be multilingual. That means that people speak more than one language. Take for instance, people from Bangalore, people who originally belong to Bangalore. You find that generally you find them speaking 4 to 5 languages. So one is English, they can speak a little bit of Hindi, then they speak Kannada fluently, and then 2 languages as well. That is one Telugu and Tamil. So one is linguistic diversity across the country, and then the other thing is how it is different, how there are regional differences with respect to the same. Then if we talk about caste, now caste can be understood both as a diversity in terms of caste system with respect to Hindus, and then also if you see that the caste system has permeated into other religions like Christianity and Islam as well. The main reason you find a caste system or traits of caste prevalent in or people preserving their caste identity in Muslims and Christians is because of conversions. So because of conversions, you see that most of the people in most of the say, Christians in India are converted. Now they converted from a particular caste, from the say, Hindu religion, from the majority Hindu religion. Now they took their caste identity there as well. So one is that. Another thing is that you have more than 4,000 castes across the country in the form of the castes and subcastes. Then you talk about the tribal diversity in India. You have tribals from a different ethnic group in the northeast. Then you have tribals mostly in central India. Then you have different tribal groups in southern India. And when I say this, I think the examples are coming in your mind because this is something you read with your topics on scheduled tribes. Then you have other tribes as well. And also, if we talk about diversity with respect to tribes, you see that how different they are. And there are tribes which are not at all with the in any interaction with the outside world. You can take example from Andaman. Then there are tribes which have been faring well, which have been providing us a lot of civil service. Talk about Minas. Then there are other types as well who live, say, in forests or they live in, say, cities as well as people who move from one place to another. The ones who are nomadic tribes. And also in terms of tribes, you find that they are also involved in various different economic activities as well. So there'll be tribes who perform shifting agriculture, shifting cultivation. Then there are tribes who work primarily as industrial laborers. Then there are tribes, other tribes as well, who say rear animals, for instance. So there is diversity with respect to that as well. And then if we talk about culture, culture is something that you see that you experience every day. The way we wear our clothes in the north, and then the idea of wearing unsewn clothes, particularly by Brahmins in the east. Cultural differences. Then you can talk about the differences in culture between north and southern part of the country, and as well you can talk about the cultural differences with respect to urban and rural areas as well. So in urban areas you find there is different culture. That is again something that has evolved from the rural culture itself, because we see that in India we do not find complete changes a lot. It is again more transitionary. So some aspects of the tradition have been preserved, and then there is modernity as well. Then we talk about regional differences. Now these regional differences can be on the basis of geography. These regional differences can be in terms of all other dimensions as well. That for instance, with change in region, change in culture happens. With change in region, change in language happens. With change in region, the hierarchy of caste change. So yes, there are various regional differences, diversities as well. Now we say that India is again a very diverse country, as you can see, on the basis of various features. Now, but still we find that we stand as one united nation. So one question is, how is that possible? How do we find this unity in diversity? And also we have to see that because of this diversity, this unity can be challenged. And how to stop that from happening? Because we see at times, because of various communal conflicts, etc., we find this unity getting challenged. So this one is, what are the features? What are the reasons behind this unity and diversity? And the other aspect is how to stop this challenge to unity because of our diversity. Now, if we talk about unity and diversity, one thing that you have to remember is it's not that because of the Indian Constitution we have become united. Something that you have to remember, because it is mentioned here. But we have to remember it is not because of the Indian Constitution that we stand united today. It is something that has been traditionally there in the Indian system. We always, if you talk about say ancient texts as well, you see that it is always this idea of one united India. Even though there were different kingdoms, even though people were say, experiencing different cultures, people were from different religions, but this idea of India has been there. The idea of Bharatvarsh has always been there. So it is not something of a modern phenomenon. It does not come with say the emergence of nation state. It is not a modern idea that we see this one India united. It is an ancient idea that India as one political and social, rather if not political, but rather social unit has been there since long. Now let's talk about various factors which become the reasons for this unity and diversity. Now the first one is you can think of India as one geopolitical unit. Think of India, you have Himalayas on the top, which kind of separates India from other countries or other regions across Himalayas. And then you have sea on 3 sides. You have Indian Ocean there. Now because of that, India has been standing as one separate geopolitical entity since long. And because of that, you see that there has been travel. People move from one place to another. The economic system was, if not integrated, but yes, there people used to take part in various economic activities together. There were traders, etc., which gives us an idea that how India, as a geopolitical entity, has been standing united. Then, if we talk about the Indian Constitution, which legalized the system, which is basically a formal contract between the people of this country, that yes, we stand together as one united country. And also, if we think about Indian Constitution, the Indian Constitution applies to everyone equally. In the light of Indian Constitution, in the eyes of Indian Constitution, everyone is equal. Then we have the same political system. Then again, in terms of economy, because of the Indian Constitution, we stand united. So the Indian Constitution gives similar rights and obligations to everyone. The Indian Constitution treats everyone equally. We have a similar political system, the parliamentary system, which again caters to the diversity as well in terms of Rajya Sabha. So rather than going into the aspect of Indian Constitution, you just understand that how Indian Constitution becomes a factor in this unification of India. Then you can talk about religious pilgrimage, particularly from the Hindu point of view. Now the thing is that Hindus, as you already know, that we are Hindus here in India, are a majority religion. And you see that there is a practice of religious pilgrimage. So religious pilgrimage means going to your shrines, various temples across the country for religious purposes. Now, if you look at our shrines or the pilgrimages, you find you have, for instance, Badrinath and Kedarnath in the north. Then you have Jagannath Puri in the east. Then you have Dwarka in the west, and say Rameshwaram in the south. You see, because of our religion, because not just religious pilgrimage, you see that the religion is there across the country. You find people from various religious backgrounds across the country. We have various religious shrines across the country, and people say who belong to this Hindu community, in the Hindu religious community, they have been going on these religious pilgrimages since ancient times. So you see that if you have to go on a religious pilgrimage, so Badrinath is in the north, then Dwarka is in the west, then Jagannath Puri in the east, and your Rameshwaram in the south. So with that, you see that it stands one as one cultural unit. Why? Because of religious pilgrimage. Also, when we talk about religion, you have to understand that in terms of tolerance and accommodative nature of the majority religion of this country, you find that various sects are there inside this religion, and then you see that the practices differ a lot. There are multiple, or there is a multitude of gods and goddesses in the Hindu culture, but still, we find that there is a sense of unity. Now, this tradition of accommodation in the Indian culture, you find that people from various religious backgrounds came and settled here conveniently. There was intermingling, there was acculturation, there was this a blend of cultural traits of the outside religions and the indigenous religion. Then also you see, as far as tradition of accommodation is concerned, it is not just with respect to religious identity. It is with respect to other cultural identities as well. That people have been, say, speaking different languages. But you see that if the languages are related, for example, take Sanskrit. We talk about Sanskrit. You see that various languages have evolved out of Sanskrit. Sanskrit was one of the major language which was spoken across the country by people, which sort of unified everyone. Then during the Mughal times, you see that other languages, even though they were foreign, they were spoken. And then this blend of Persian and Hindi created Urdu, which again become a language which is spoken across the country. And in modern times, you can see that even English can be considered as a unifying force. So if you start from north and go till south, you find that everyone speaks English. Not everyone, but a lot of people speak English. And English is a language, even though it is modern, even though it is Western, even though it is coming from outside, has become a unifying force. But the reason is this tradition of accommodation, that we accommodate. We let other cultures, other beliefs, other faiths coexist with the existing cultures. Then your caste system, you find that rather than caste system, you can think of Varna system. You have these 4 Varnas that are applicable across the country. You'll find the same hierarchy across the country. So one way we say that the caste system has regional differences, but you find that it is uniform across the country, uniform in its presence, that it is present across the country. There can be differences in terms of hierarchy, but the presence of caste system is there across the country, which also works as a unifying force. Then if we talk about tradition of interdependence, we have been interdependent on each other for various things. Just think about interdependence in terms of caste system, from where you can link it with Jajmani system, wherein there are few castes who depend on other castes for few services. For example, the so-called upper castes were dependent on your so-called lower caste and say the profession of a barber. So they were, for their services of a barber, dependent on them. And in turn, the barber was dependent in the sense that they needed, say, grains, food grains, money, etc. out of them. So there has been a tradition of interdependence in terms of caste system. Then you can talk about interdependence in terms of our economic system. So these are a few factors, basis which you find that even though we are a diverse country, even though we have a lot of diversity in this country, but still there is a sense of unity. There is a sense of one India in this country. Now, if we talk about this unity and diversity, so this answers, I saw one of the questions. So this answers one of the question that how this diversity leads to unity. One. Second, if we talk about, say, your uniformity, the idea of uniformity, do we have to be uniform to be united? If I ask you a question, do we need to be uniform in order to be united? What do you think? No. We see that even though, irrespective of the diversity, even though we had this diversity, there was no uniformity with respect to culture. We always have been standing as one strong united entity. So this answers other question, that even though there can be differences, because unity can be achieved. Yes, unity can be definitely achieved with uniformity, but it is again not necessary. Then unity can also be achieved with diversity. In India, if we see, we have unity since long, because if we talk about, say, if not in terms of say political unity, but that also at times was seen. For instance, you talk about Ashoka, you talk about Mughal period as well. You see that yes, in terms of political entity as well, we were united. There are instances of unity, but you see that Indians have been united with diversity. And yes, there are few elements of uniformity as well. For example, the uniformity of caste system. So yes, we can be united with uniformity, but most importantly, we can be united in diversity. And this brings us to this question, which you can say is related to your uniform civil code as well. So right now, will be premature to talk about uniform civil code, because as of now, what are going to be the dimensions of uniform civil code, etc., have not been made clear. But the idea of uniformity is something that we have to look into, and we have to look into it neutrally. Now, basis this, I have given this question that you have to practice, but let's have a quick discussion on this question. So if I say that India needs a composite culture model, rather than a uniformity model of unity. India needs a composite culture model. Composite culture model will talk about diversity or preserving our diversity, rather than a uniformity model of unity. Discuss. So can anyone give any idea as to how to go about this question? How do you think we can go about this question of diversity and unity? It is ultimately directed, ultimately it is in the same direction, but yes, it has been framed differently. So okay, let's talk about, yeah. So if we talk about say uniformity model, if we talk about in terms of uniformity model, if we apply the Western concept of secularism that you might be aware, if you're not, please do not worry about it. We are going to discuss it in the future. But if we say that we do not preserve our diversity, religious diversity, do you think it will become a problem? Yes, absolutely. Yes, you can mention uniform civil code, but as of now, we do not know what are going to be the features, what is exactly going to be the aspects of uniform civil code. So yes, all of you are suggesting something. Preserving diversity is essential, but uniformity in certain spheres is imperative, especially when it comes to women and children. Yes, we'll come to that aspect. Preserving cultural heritage of India is one dimension. Okay, so Abhay has suggested something good. So bringing in uniformity without hindering the idea of diversity. That is also one dimension that has to be covered here. So one thing is someone suggesting that they personally do not believe in the idea of diversity. They are more inclined towards uniformity. But you have to see, yes, you can have your personal beliefs. That is absolutely, you're free to have your personal beliefs. But your personal beliefs should not reflect a lot in your answers. Yes, obviously, we all have biases, but that's where the role of sociology comes into picture. That sociology helps us balance. So yes, we might personally believe in some ideas, but we have to keep ourselves neutral. Because as a civil servant, partiality is a value that is expected from you. So we have to be neutral with respect to that. So, okay, so maybe yes, everyone can do it. Just think about these things. That when we talk about this question, when we discuss this question, you think about unity in diversity and unity in uniformity. These are two ideas. One, you have to again look into pros and cons of both the models of. So there'll be two models. One, unity in uniformity, and the other one, unity in diversity. What we have to do is we have to look at both these models in the light of positives and negatives, and also you remember that you keep your answer balanced. And when it comes to say uniformity, you again have to see that it is not making everyone uniform. It's not like the Western idea of citizenship, as I think I've already given an example of Western idea of citizenship, that everyone is a citizen, irrespective of their socio-economic cultural background. But then in India, we see that our ideas are different with respect to citizenship. With your citizenship comes your social background as well. So when you talk about uniformity, please make sure that you talk about uniformity as well in a balanced manner. So for instance, someone is suggesting the application of similar constitutional laws across the country is a form of unity. Yes, it is. So your example of GST, example of your economic system, take example of GST as well. That again talks about uniformity. Right. So I believe now you will be in a position to answer this question. And because this is a fairly simple question, but the thing is you just have to think what all values and ideas that you have to talk about. Now, this was about unity and diversity. Another thing is there's one more question that has been asked in the past, and I think I've mentioned this yesterday. That the spirit of tolerance and love is not only an interesting feature of Indian society from early times, but it is also playing an important part at the present. So the spirit of tolerance and love. You can talk about this spirit of tolerance and love when you talk about the way India has preserved its diversity since the ancient times. India has been diverse since always, but it has preserved its diversity till date and keeping everyone united. How was that possible? With the idea of tolerance and love. So if you look at this question, you can talk about the idea of unity or the idea of tolerance and love from the olden times. Then you can move on to your medieval period, wherein as well you can talk about tolerance with respect to religion, tolerance with respect to say politics, etc. And then if you come to present, you can talk about that how we're still able to maintain this diversity. Why? Because tolerance and love are one of the most important features of one of the most important values in Indian society. Now, also what you have to do is, because you see that tolerance and love, the spirit of tolerance and love has been challenged time and again. So we cannot be blindsided to that. We cannot say that we have to just talk about the politics of it, because we see in terms of our regional conflicts, in terms of our communal conflicts, we find that this spirit of tolerance and love has been challenged time and again. But the question is more again directed towards the positive aspect. So the majority of the question has to go towards positive of it. But again, you have to say that yes, you also have to mention that this spirit of tolerance and love has been challenged time and again. But then again, you give a positive flavor to it, saying that those challenges have been met bravely by the Indian society, and that is the reason we still stand united and still have that spirit of tolerance and love prevalent in Indian society. So this is a fairly simple question that, because we had our discussion completely on diversity and unity, this follows from that. But you just have to understand that you do not just have to write the positive part. Do mention the challenges that our diversity or that our tolerance, the spirit of tolerance and love has faced. Because again, this is a question that you can think about from the perspective of diversity. So I hope these questions are clear. And so what today we have discussed so far is we discussed family as an institution, marriage, and unity and diversity. And as far as this chapter is concerned, we have also discussed caste system or the system of stratification. Now, what did we do? And now you see the process that I told you, that what we're going to do is we're going to look at various social institutions. We're also going to look at various sections of people, and we're going to look at everything in the light of change. And on the basis of your previous year questions that have been asked, you would have realized by now that this is how the questions are generally framed in the light of change. So what we did was we looked at caste system, basic features of caste system, and then we looked at various factors which are bringing about changes in the caste system. Then post that we moved on to our institutions of family and marriage. We talked about their functions, how the functions have been changing, how the composition, the size of the institutions have been changing, or particularly the size of family has been changing. What are the factors responsible for that? And then we move on to marriage, and we also talked about new forms of family and the new newly created institutions of family are coming up. Then we moved on to discussing about diversity in India, and how India has been a diverse country since ancient times, and it has preserved its diversity while remaining united in the present times as well. And related to the diversity, we have talked about this question, which was based on these values of tolerance and love. Yes, you can also include racial factor in diversity. Yes, absolutely, because there are other forms of diversity as well that we have not mentioned. So you're asking about an overview of some challenges with respect to diversity. Now we see that if we talk about the challenges with respect to diversity, you can think in terms of communal conflicts that happens between various religious groups. You can think in terms of regionalism, which happens, for instance, the imposition of Hindi across the country, which met with protests from the southern part of the country. Then again, then also if we talk about diversity in the light of change, because this is our next chapter, but I'll just give you a glimpse of it. If we talk about diversity in the light of globalization, modernization, urbanization, etc. If you look at diversity in the light of globalization, we say that because of globalization, we are becoming homogeneous. There is a certain sense of homogeneity that is prevailing in the society. Now, everyone is tending towards speaking a similar language. Everyone is wearing, say, similar clothes. Various cultural traits are becoming similar, are becoming same, are becoming homogeneous. So, globalization, as a force of change, say, is a challenge to the diversity in our country. Similarly, you can think of modernization. Other aspects is you can talk about, say, the implications of GST with respect to our diversity, for instance. So now everyone has to follow the same taxation structure, for instance. But rather than getting into the economic side of it, you have to remember that we're going to stick to the social dimension. So I hope I've answered your question. And with globalization, you'll understand this. Yes, the idea of separate states. So Suren is asking whether the idea of demand for separate states can be considered as a challenge to diversity. Yes, absolutely. The idea of regionalism, because idea of regionalism is not just having feeling for one's region, but it manifests in various forms. As say protest against the imposition of Hindi, then you can think in terms of asking for a separate state. Think in terms of asking for administrative autonomy. Right. So you have various ways in which you can see that the diversity is challenged. Then you're talking about. So that if you can please rephrase your question, I'm not able to get it. So with respect to sociology optional, see, we won't be able to discuss it here. It's better if you speak to your mentor, sir or madam, and they'll be in a better position to make you understand. Because again, your choice of optional has to be personalized rather than a general discussion on sociology. It has to be your choice of option has to be personalized. Yes, so you are saying that if you are able to remove the role of caste in politics or say role of religion in politics, we need more strict legislation. Yes, we do, and I think we have discussed this yesterday. So you're asking the difference between caste system and Varna system. It has been discussed yesterday. It has been discussed yesterday, and you have it in the notes. So Varna system, when we talk about Varna system, you see that Varna system has has mobility, has social mobility, but the caste system doesn't. For instance, and now Jati system, what we are talking about is the castes that we see in India are actually termed as Jati. So it is not very different from caste system. So in sociology, again, the thing is that there are going to be various ideas, but we have to go with what is general. So generalization of ideas and social norms is what sociology does. And also when we talk about differences between Varna system and caste system, one is social mobility, then one is the idea of in caste system, you see that it is based, the membership is based on birth, that the family that you are born in is your caste, that identifies your caste. Then if you talk about Varna system, it is your occupation that determines your caste, determines your Varna. So yes, we have discussed this yesterday and it is in the PPT. You can just go through it and you'll be able to understand this. So Sneha is asking a question that going against the social norms, is it good or not as a civil servant? So we'll discuss this when we come to the idea of development and empowerment. We are going to address that. So keep that question in mind because this is a good question that you have asked. Because ultimately we say that all these subjects that we read during our civil services preparation, all these subjects that find a mention in our syllabus have something to do with the examination, has something to do with making you a civil servant, have something to do finding out the values that you as a civil servant have. So with the idea of empowerment and development, you'll be able to answer that question. So yes, there are no perfect answers as such, but you'll definitely get a fair idea how to proceed with that. Because you are right in saying that if we change a social norm abruptly, then it is going to have say negative impacts on the society because the entire social structure gets disturbed. So how to go about it? And this is something we'll take up. Okay, so with this, we move on to our next chapter, that is effects of globalization on Indian society and urbanization. Now we have a basic idea about globalization and urbanization from our economy discussions, and also from geography. And also we have been referring to these terms in the previous chapter and today as well, because these are those factors in light of which we see that Indian society is changing. Now, first up, the first thing is that we are going to take up globalization, and then we'll move on to urbanization. Now, before we start with what is globalization, what are its impact, just look at these few clippings. 100 days of Russia-Ukraine war, how India has been affected. An event happening, a war happening thousands of kilometers away from the country, and we are discussing about how it can impact India. Also, someone getting elected as a president in the states, how it impacts Indian economy. So this gives you an idea that whatever happens across the world, whatever happens across the globe, each and every country goes through a certain level of impact. So think about the 2008 crisis, economic crisis, how the entire world, world in the sense that all the countries were impacted. Think about COVID-19. With COVID-19, the breaking down of supply chains. With COVID-19, countries putting up restrictions on travel, international travel, international relations because of this COVID-19 getting stressed for a while between China and other countries. So you see that something that happens in a place, now we find that more and more it impacts other people across the globe. So you can be living in one part of the country when COVID that originated in one place started spreading, it did not spare anyone. It had a widespread impact. And not just in terms of a challenge to health, but as a greater challenge to our society and economy. Then you see, in terms of consumer goods, in terms of your food items, you see that you have these examples. You have Domino's that is available pretty much everywhere. Now Domino's has pizza, say it delivers pizza, it makes pizza, now which is an Italian dish, but then you see that it has been popularized by an American company. Now at airports you would have seen Costa Coffee. This is a chain of cafes or coffee chain from the UK, from the United Kingdom. Then this South African chain called Nando's. And these are examples that you find with respect to food, and you have other examples as well. You find that not just restaurants or not just food chains from outside are present in India. You find that Indian food chains are available outside as well. Take examples, Chai Pani in USA or this Little India in Portugal. Similarly, recently you have found in news about the top 50 restaurants in which there were two Indian restaurants whose name was there. One was Press Int in Dubai, and the other one was Gagan Anand in Thailand. Now the thing is, these are Indian restaurants. These have been popularized for their Indian food, but you find them not even in India. So Indian food became popular, is actually popular across the world. Now getting a reward in the sense that they came in the top 50 list, but you find that these restaurants are not there in India. Also, if you see, you have various brands. You can talk about your social media, you can talk about apparel, you can talk about electronics, you can talk about your vaccine. You see that in each and every aspect, you find that there seems to be an integration of the global economy, of the global society. You talk about social media, you get to know what are the social norms that are being followed in the US. How is the institution of family there? And that too on the tip of your phone, on the tip of your thumb. So you can just scroll on your phone and find out. You can watch the movies. Similarly, Indian culture is also finding interest across the globe. You can take example of yoga, now primarily originated in India, practiced in India, getting popular across the globe. So we see with these examples, you find that there has been an integration and interaction between various cultures, various economies, various political systems, various countries across the globe. And with this, we'll start thinking about the process of globalization. We try to define it. Globalization is a social, and we'll come to this, how it is a social, economic, and political. So globalization is a social, economic, and political process that brings people, markets, goods, services, cultures, ideas, technology, and capital closer to each other and increase interaction between them. Also, globalization envisages a borderless world. Now think about globalization. If we say that one incident or one event happening in one country is impacting all other countries across the globe, do you think their borders, their physical borders matter so much? You would say no. One economic event happening in one country, again impacting everyone. The idea of COVID, the crisis, the economic crisis that followed, you see, it is impacting everyone, irrespective of the borders. Borders are not so important anymore. Now, someone sitting physically 2,000 kilometers apart, away from you, you can just connect with them over a call. You can connect with them over a video call. Borders are not, do not matter so much now. And if you look at it, not just people with example, you can take example of people coming together with social media, people coming together with migration for work, with migration for educational opportunities, with markets getting closer in the sense that people trading goods from one country to another, selling them in the international market. Now you can import anything using your e-com services through the internet, and various goods, services get exchanged. Now this process of all these aspects of life, all these political, social, economic aspects of life coming together is called globalization. Now the question is, before we come to various features of globalization, now the question is, if we see that even in the past, people have been interacting. There was interaction among people. There was migration. There was impact of various political dimensions or economic dimensions across the world. Think about this. You had your Silk Route, using which things were traded between countries. You had Britishers coming to India. You had advent of Islam in India. Even if you look at just from say Indian point of view. So we see that globalization is not something new. It's not something modern. It is something that has been there, because right from the beginning, right from the origin of humanity, you see globalization has been there, because people have been migrating from one place to another. Because this concept of nation states is new, is modern. But you see, people have been moving across the globe in search of food, in search of economic activities, in search of better lifestyle, going away from harsh climatic conditions, migrating seasonally, and impacting each other. Think about the idea of democracy, the idea of liberty, the idea of unity that we have in India. Now these ideas are coming from the West. Yes, the idea of say unity was there, because we talk about India as a united whole since ancient past. But think about the idea of democracy, liberty, which were not there. Think about the idea of making a written constitution. So various aspects we see that it is not just something new that is happening. It has been there since long. So basis this, can you say, is it a modern process? You would say, no, it is not a modern process. It has been there since long. But what if I ask you, that do you think in the past, something happening in India would matter so much to people living in the United States? Say if we go 100, 200 years back, if we go say 500 years back in history, do you think something happening in India would matter so much to the people in the States? And your answer would be no. So that means there has been a definite change with respect to the experience of globalization, with respect to the spread of globalization. And we would see that it is with the advent of ICT or communication technology, or with deepening of our science and technology getting better. This process has increased in speed. This process has deepened. This process has spread even to the remotest part of the globe. So if we say, is it a modern process? We would say, no, it is not a modern process, because generally you find these two say viewpoints with respect to this. So there is first viewpoint which says, no, it is not a modern process. It has been there since long. But then there is another group or another viewpoint which says it is primarily a modern phenomena, and which started and spread across the globe post Second World War with these ideas of liberalization, privatization, and capitalism. Now these ideas are, I think we have discussed, but if not, we are going to discuss them again. So they say that it is after your Second World War that globalization has actually started making the impact that it is making today. So in terms of globalization, in terms of people coming closer, in terms of people interacting, yes, globalization has been there. But if we talk about in terms of integration, we see that it becomes more of a modern process. So you can think it like this. So in terms of interaction, because you would not find a lot of integration back then, and you can think of it in terms of integration of global economy, integration of international society. Something happens in India, you'll find protests happening across the globe. Black Lives Matter will spread to almost every part of the world. To find that in terms of integration, you'll find it is again can be thought of more of a modern process, because the economies were not impacted as much. Yes, your immediate neighbors would get impacted, but if we talk about an impact on a global level, you would not see that so much. But yes, in terms of interaction, you see that it has been there since long, since our ancient past, and it is not just something limited to India. It is applicable to the entire world. Now with this, what we'll do is we'll start understanding various features, various aspects of globalization. But now today we are not left with a lot of time. So let's do one thing. Let's take up your questions with respect to the previous chapter. And rather than shooting new questions, let me check a few other questions that are there which have not been addressed. Yes, you can add interdependence as well. And this is something that we'll take up tomorrow, because it is not just in terms of integration. You see that we depend on each other. Talk about active pharmaceutical ingredients during the COVID period. So because of that, the production of the pharmaceutical goods stopped all across the country or all across the globe. Why? Because your raw material, your active pharmaceutical ingredients come from one part of the world, that is China. And with the borders closing, you could find that the entire world had no option left but to stop their manufacturing lines. Yes, we'll start with globalization, the other aspects of globalization tomorrow. Let me look at a few other questions and see if we have any other good questions that can be discussed. So, Sudra was asking which type of real examples can be right in the exams. Issues got cleared with good law or issues pending with prolonging for clearance. Okay, I understood the idea. Now, see, she's talking about when we talk about social changes that happen in the society, to which factor do we give importance? Do we say that these have happened because of changes on the political level, or these have happened because of the the society coming together? Now you have to understand, because this is a theme that is generally discussed in the political science. You see that for any law to come into say picture, for any law to get passed, for any law to be practiced in a particular country, you see that there has to be certain legitimacy from the society. Generally, you'll find that whatever values, whatever practices society legitimizes, you'll find them in terms of law. You'll find laws becoming out of those social practices, social norms, social legitimacy. But it is not always the case. There can be laws to which majority of the society is opposed. Just think about Widow Remarriage Act. Yes, there was a certain section of the society which was vouching for Widow Remarriage Act, while there were others. There were conservative groups in society which were right opposite, and which did not want this change to happen. So whenever any social change comes, you always remember that there'll be two waves. So, for example, the impact of globalization, or for example, the impact of cultural homogeneity. We see that there with the with our experience with westernization and modernization, we see that more and more we start celebrating new festivals. Our cultural changes are happening. Our value system is undergoing a change. But always you'll find that there is a reaction opposite to it. Now that reaction need not be equal, but it is the opposite reaction is always there. So backlash against globalization, backlash against use of English. The another thing you'll find is say assertion of cultural and regional identities, in the sense that various linguistic dialects, people from various linguistic groups asserting their identity that our language has to be recognized. These two waves will always be there. And as far as law and society is concerned, you see that yes, laws do make changes in the society, but at times you'll find that the impact is not very much. You'll find that practice of untouchability has been abolished, but you'll still find prevalent in the society. Think about dowry. So we have laws, and it is not that these are new laws. Think about the aspect of say dowry. It has been there since long. It has been banned since long, but the practice is still prevalent. So as long as society is not ready to accept the changes brought about by law, laws do not become effective. So this is, I think, this is what you asked, and you got your answer. Yes, unity can be considered both from top-down and bottom-up approaches. Now, what are these? If we see that one constitution unifying everyone. Similarly, if we talk about bottom-up, the idea, our value system, the values of love, tolerance, interdependence, integrating us, uniting us, bottom-up. Yes, so the ideas that we have, rather than classifying them, you can think about them and go with them, because the ideas remain the same. You can just classify them as how you want. Yeah, so we have not gone through this. These aspects will be covered, so do not worry about these. Yes, it will be valid to put real-life examples in your answers, because yes, but you always have to remember when it comes to matters of politics, try to be a little cautious, so that you don't have to, say necessarily show your bias in your answer. Deterritorialization has not been discussed today. It will be discussed tomorrow. We have not even discussed it, so please. So globalization has contributed to economic disparity, etc. Yes, this will be discussed. Yes, it has to be discussed. This will be discussed, and this will be discussed tomorrow. Okay, so with this, let's conclude our lecture for today. And what we'll do is we'll start with features of globalization tomorrow, and I expect you to write the answer of the question that I have provided. The question on composite culture, the question basically on diversity. So thank you everyone for your patience. Let's meet tomorrow morning 6 a.m. And also again, I'll repeat, please do send your feedback form, fill it and send it across to our